Thank you, Dame Siobhan. It's a pleasure, as always, to serve under your chairmanship. Let me start by congratulating my right honourable friend, the member for Malden, for securing this debate and for the characteristically thoughtful manner in which he approached his speech earlier. Let me also take this opportunity. I think it's the first time I've appeared opposite the new police minister, who's now doing the job I was doing until a few months ago. I congratulate her on her appointment, and I really do wish her well in the job. I hope she makes a great success of it. And while, of course, I'll hold the government to account, I will do everything I can to constructively support her in making the job a success. And I really do wish her well in the role. And I would like to just start by reminding colleagues of the way that live facial recognition works. It is, by the way, different to retrospective facial recognition, which we haven't debated today, and I don't propose to go into in the interest of time. But live facial recognition starts with a watch list, as some people have said, of people who are wanted by the police. Now, it is not the case that anyone can get on this watch list. The watch list generally comprises of people who are wanted for criminal offences, often very serious criminal offences, people who have failed to attend court, and people who are registered sex offenders where the police want to check up that they're complying with their conditions. As people walk down the high street, they're then scanned typically by a CCTV camera on a van, a mobile van, and then compared to the watch list. Now, the vast majority of people are not on the watch list, as you would expect, and their image is immediately and automatically deleted. So anyone walking by, not on the watch list, the image is deleted instantaneously. Where the person is on the watch list, the police will stop them and ask them if they have any form of identification. Now, to be very clear, no one gets convicted on the basis of that facial recognition match. So it is not overturning the presumption of innocence. And of course, if on stopping the person it turns out they're not the person on the watch list, obviously they carry on their way. But if they are the person on the watch list, obviously a normal criminal investigation will follow with the normal standards of evidence. But to be absolutely clear, if someone is identified as being a match, then there is a normal criminal investigation conducted, to the normal criminal standards. Nobody is convicted on the basis of this evidence alone. Now let me, or indeed this evidence at all, let me come on now to the question around racial disparity. Now, when this technology was first introduced about 7 years ago, there were reports, accurate reports, that there was racial bias in the way the algorithm at the time operated. Now, the algorithm has been developed a great deal since those days, and it has been tested definitively, but since then, by the National Physical Laboratory, which is, first of all, the nation's premier testing laboratory. It is the gold standard of testing, and it has been done relatively recently. And I'll just read for the committee's benefit what the results of that were. The NPL, the National Physical Laboratory study, found that when used at the settings maintained by the police, the 0.6 the member for Brent Central referred to earlier, there was, and I quote, no statistically significant difference in the facial recognition technology's accurate across different demographic groups. In other words, the technology as it is being used today, not 5 years ago, where there were issues, not 5 years ago, but today, certified by the National Physical Laboratory, there is not any racial bias at the settings used. So the misidentification rate, the court case, the Bridges court case, said, I think, a standard of a 1 in 1,000 false positives. So for every 1,000 people stopped, 999 of the people they think it is, and 1 is misidentified. I think the system in practice is actually delivering, from my recollection, the Minister may have more up-to-date figures, is running at about 1 in 6,000, which is an extraordinarily high rate of accuracy. It is much more accurate than a regular stop and search. Now, a regular stop and search, where the police officer stops someone and searches them for drugs or a knife or something, about 25 to 30% of those are successful, about 70% therefore are not successful. The equivalent figure for live facial recognition to that 70% for a regular physical stop and search is 0.02%. That is to say that this technology is 4,500 times less likely to result in someone being inappropriately stopped than a regular stop and search. So hugely, by 3 orders of magnitude, reduces the likelihood of someone being improperly stopped and searched. Now, in terms of the use of this on the ground, at my request, I asked for this to be particularly tried in the centre of Croydon, which is the borough that I represent in Parliament. And over the last 9 months or so, it's been deployed on a relatively regular basis, kind of once a week, something like that. And I believe the Minister was supposed to go down there this morning to have a look, and I certainly encourage her to go again as soon as she's able to. So over the last 9 months, it's been deployed on a number of occasions, probably about once a week, something like that. And by the way, when it's used, someone made a point about, do you know about it? Yes, one of the guidelines is there must be public signage displayed telling the public that this technology is in use. Now, over that period of time in Croydon, it has resulted in approximately 200 arrests of people who would not otherwise have been arrested, including for things like Class A drug supply, grievous bodily harm, fraud, domestic burglary, all kinds of offences. But it has also included a man who had been wanted for two rapes, dating back to 2017. That is a man who would, to this day, still be free, a wanted rapist, were it not for this technology. And just a couple of weeks ago, a man was stopped and subsequently arrested in relation to a rape allegation from June of this year. So we're getting people who have committed, or alleged to have committed, rape, who would not have been arrested, would not have been stopped. They'd be still walking free, were it not for this technology. It was only the fact they walked past a camera outside East Croydon Station or somewhere that they were stopped by the police. And of course they'll now have a normal trial with the normal standards of evidence, but they wouldn't have been caught in the first place were it not for this technology. And when I talk about this to people in Croydon, to like public meetings and that kind of thing, I've done quite a lot of public meetings on this, and you explain, look, these are the people that get caught, but the price we as the public pay for that is that if you walk down Croydon High Street, you might get scanned, and if you're innocent, your picture gets immediately deleted. By and large, the overwhelming majority of the people in Croydon, the public that I've spoken to about this, think that that is a reasonable trade-off. Now, there should, of course, be protections. I mean, members, starting with the Right Honourable Member for Malden, have quite rightly said there should be guidelines, there should be rules and procedures around this. Now, it's not true to say that this is a complete sort of vacuum as far as rules and regulations are concerned. There was a court case in the Court of Appeal that others have mentioned called Bridges in 2020, and that looked at the way that South Wales Police were using this between, I think, 2017 and 2020. And they found that there were some ways that the South Wales Police were using this technology that were not appropriate, that broke things like data protection, privacy, and other rules. And that court case, the Bridges court case, set out in case law some of the guidelines that had to be adhered to in order for this to be lawful. And it was things like the public signage, the rate of accuracy that I've referred to, the having no racial bias, and those kind of things. So that exists in case law. Secondly, there are guidelines. The College of Policing has published, I do hope I'm not taking your entire speech here, Minister. The College of Policing have set out guidelines in their authorised professional practice, which is national guidelines, which the police are supposed to stick to. So there is guidelines available out there for police to adhere to. Now, there is an argument or a debate to be had about whether for the sake of clarity and for the sake of democratic accountability, we in Parliament should set something out more formally. And that is, I think, a point that the Member for Malden made. I think there is some merit in doing that, in clarifying at a national level where these guidelines sit. But I wouldn't go as far as Europe, because if we did, those rapists would not have been arrested, for example. And I'd also just be careful about making sure any legislation is flexible enough to accommodate changing technology. So using primary legislation may not be the right thing, but perhaps a regulation-making power, so things can be kept up to date from time to time, might be a more sensible approach. In the meantime, while we consider it, I strongly urge the Police Minister not to halt the use of this technology. It is arresting criminals as we speak, particularly in Croydon, but elsewhere as well, who would not otherwise be caught. And I would urge her to continue supporting the police to roll it out. There was I think, some money allocated in the budget for this current financial year to continue developing this technology. And I would very much welcome an update from the Minister on whether that money is still being spent in the current financial year. I do hope it hasn't somehow been snaffled by the Treasury in a misguided cost-saving effort. So on that note, I will just conclude by saying this is an important technology. It is taking people off the streets who would otherwise not be caught, and the Minister has my support in continuing its rollout and deployment.